Hey everybody, I'm here with Mark Plath. He's the Concordia survivor. You guys are familiar with Costa Concordia. It was a cruise ship that sank in 2012. Most of you are familiar. This is one of our survivors. His name is Mark Plath. He survived with his wife. But yeah, I'm gonna let him take it away. So go ahead. It's all yours. Camera's all yours.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me. Yeah, so we were on the Costa Concordia 10 years ago when it sank on January 13th of, I guess, what year was that? 2012. It was my wife's first cruise and I guess my second cruise. And we had flown into Rome, Italy that morning and kind of toured around Rome because we got there real early and then went over to, I think the town is called Fiumicino, and that's where the dock was. And I was telling you last time we chatted that there was actually a taxi workers strike, and we had a lot of difficulty getting from the airport over to the dock to get on the boat, and we almost missed the boat. We ended up trying to walk, and we could see the boat a long ways off. Right. Ended up in an industrial area, and then asking some people, "How do you get to that boat over there?" And some random guy, gave us a ride, and we got on the boat at like 6:30, and boarding had ended at 6:15, but they let us on anyway. Luckily, well, I don't know if it's luckily, but we got on. They took our luggage. We went up to dinner. And then we went to bed because we'd been up for about 24 hours, and that's when the boat struck shore on the island of Giglio when we were sleeping. Right. So we actually woke up not from striking because it kind of did a side swipe underwater, but because they had an announcement on the loudspeaker in our room, and it was very loud and woke us up. Right. And I think it was a third language that was English, so we finally knew what was going on. But the weird thing was they told us as passengers that there was an electrical problem and that everything would be okay, and that nothing to worry about is what they said. There's an electrical problem, we have it under control, right, and don't worry about it. So that was our instruction. So we rolled over and went back to sleep. Right. And if you watch a documentary on Discovery Channel, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna ask you, when did you realize that, like, when you were sleeping, like, when did you, like, when you woke up, like, this is a question I didn't ask you off camera, but like, when you were sleeping, like, normally you're sleeping, you're flat, your bed is flat. But like, when did you start to notice like ship starting to like turn like this? Like, what did you wake up? And I know you said like off camera, like you woke up and like you were kind of like this, but like, did you feel the ship kind of turning like this when it was tilting over? Like that was
so
hard to ask you.
So big ships will list a little bit left and right, usually with the waves, nothing to be concerned about. Sorry, let me close this door here. But they, when we woke up from the announcement, out of a dead sleep, the ship was leaning towards our feet a decent amount. And when they said there was an electrical problem, we just figured, they'll figure it out or something, didn't worry about it. And then when we woke up the second time from the second announcement, we were leaning towards our head, and the head was facing towards the middle of the ship, I guess the right side of the ship. And it was a significant difference. So when we woke up, we could tell a big difference that, why were we leaning towards our feet? Right. And the second time we woke up towards our head, we didn't know the time frame in between the two wake-ups though. Right. So, and the second announcement did say to go to your muster stations.
Right. And then that's when you went to the muster station and everyone was freaking out and everything, right?
Yeah, yep. And so shortly after we jumped out of bed, put some clothes on, grabbed our wallets and our iPhones back when iPhones were new. We grabbed life jackets out of our closets, and our deck steward came by, knocked on the door, made sure that we were getting our life jackets and we're getting out. And luckily we had shoes on, and we're fully clothed, and we put on light jackets because we knew it was cold outside. Right. And followed the crowd to the muster stations. There were people at every level on the stairs telling you which way to go. So we felt well directed in where to go. And then we got out onto the fourth deck on the left side of the ship. And at that point, there was just massive people. I mean, hundreds of people on each. There were 4 muster stations and just hundreds and hundreds of people standing there. Seemed like a lot of people knew what was going on, but we didn't. It was 4 of us in our group, my wife and then her brother and his wife. And we had, our impression was that there was an electrical problem and that, everything was going to be okay because that's what they told us. Right. And so we just kept thinking, like, maybe the ballast of the ship isn't working. Maybe it's electrically controlled. This stinks because it's our first day on the ship. Maybe it's just leaning because they can't control the ballast, and maybe they'll correct it and then we'll continue on with our cruise because it's a 7-day cruise. We're thinking this is weird. And that was about the extent of our concern and worry, is that the ship was leaning a little bit. We had no idea it was taking on water.
Right.
And then they started loading people on lifeboats, and that kind of was weird. Like, why would you load people on lifeboats if there's an electrical problem? Again, it wasn't making sense to us. So yeah, so we kind of waited around, and people would push towards a lifeboat, and kind of people would hold up children and say, let me on because I've got a child. And you had this mass of people, let's say there's like 600 people on the deck that's like maybe 20 feet wide by, I don't know, 500 feet long or something. And they would open a lifeboat, and then all 600 people would push towards that lifeboat. They get 100 people on, and you have 400 people left that aren't on the lifeboat. So then they would start lowering that one. Then, down on the other end, they may open another lifeboat. So the whole mass of people kind of push towards that one. And the crowd started to get lower. And we kind of decided, why are we in a hurry? Why are we pushing and shoving? Let's not do all that. So we just stood back and kind of leaned against a wall, because the ship was at enough of an angle where it felt good to lean against a wall.
Right.
And we just kind of were chit-chatting and thinking, our statement was, of course there's enough lifeboats. They've learned that from the Titanic. Obviously there's enough lifeboats. We don't need to worry. We don't need to push to be on the first one. Let's just get on the last one, instead of pushing and shoving and all that. So that was kind of our attitude.
Right. And you thought,
as they were loading the different lifeboats, though.
And you thought that the ship
was
10, 20 miles out, like from land, and then you looked over and land was like right on the other side, right?
Yeah, so we were standing there, and we could only see shore. It seemed like 10 miles away. It was just a faint line of lights along the water real far off. So we thought we were out in the middle of the ocean, 10 miles or so from shore. And we just thought, like, again, why are people getting on lifeboats? What's the big rush? It's just the ship's leaning. Who cares if the ship's leaning? And so we decided to go check out the other side of the ship just to see what was going on over there. So we went through the hallway. The four of us came out on the other side, which would be the underside when it leans over. And we realized that there was an island right there, 100 yards away, 300 feet or so. And so being that it was so close, it kind of, our nerves calmed down, thinking like, oh, we're not out in the middle of the ocean. There's land right there. You could look to the left and see the port of Giglio, which was lit up. And there were boats around, like fishing boats that had come up next to us and all that. And so we decided to go back to the high side because, who'd be dumb enough to be on the low side of a ship when it's rolling over? You wouldn't want to be on the underside. And so we stayed up on the high side for a while, and they stopped lowering lifeboats because it was leaning too much. They couldn't, the boats couldn't get lowered down by their cranes. And then eventually we were just kind of waiting around and joking around and chatting. And I think we had the old iPhone app when it first came out that would tell you the degrees of angle. So we were setting an iPhone on the floor. And I remember, I think when it started, we were at like 11-degree angle. And then later on, it was 17-degree, 20-degree angle. It was enough to where it was making it difficult to walk. And the crowd got pretty small. And somebody came by and said, a lifeboat came back. We need to go to the other side of the ship. And they opened some doors, and they counted out 120 people. And we were like number 20 because the door was near us. And I think in the hallway going through the ship sideways, we were sitting on our butts scooting because it was at such an angle. And then we came out on the low side, and there's a railing in front of you. Kind of were pressed up against a railing because the ship was leaning enough. And there were lifeboats there. I think there were some empty tenders that had come back. And I guess we were just on that side waiting for one to get close enough to get onto. And we watched, there were a couple of fishing boats that just wouldn't get close enough. They'd get like 100 feet away and then kind of turn. And we're just like, why aren't they coming over to the edge of the ship so we can get on? And the tenders were doing the same thing. And they let out one of those barrels you'll see above your head sometimes on the deck. They have these big barrels that they can like release, and they shoot down, or they roll down into the water. And when they hit water, they just blow up into this huge life raft. Right. So they did that. And one of them kind of floated around the backside of the ship. And then they did a second one, and it inflated underneath a crane. It was kind of stuck between if you could think of like a crane off the ship, if it was leaning like this downward, and then the lifeboat was underneath it, stuck between the water and the crane. And so some guys got on it to try to free it from under the crane, and it popped or something. We heard a noise and started hearing air come out. And the 2 or 3 guys on it, they were, foreign guys that worked on the ship. They jumped into the water and swam towards the island. And I thought, why did they swim towards the island? We're right here. Why wouldn't they swim back to us? And that's when I looked at my wife and I said, the ship's rolling and we're on the underside. Like we're going to be under the ship. Right. And so I said, we have to jump right now. And so she climbed the railing and was the first one to jump out of the passengers. And and I did as well. And I think it might have been 200 people with us actually. Everybody jumped and swam to shore, and we got to the shore, and it was kind of a rocky surface, and we got to a part that was too steep to get out, so we swam over a little ways to where it was flatter and got out there. And we stood by shore and helped people out of the water for a while. Some people were barefoot. Some people were wearing like cocktail dresses. The water was cold. I think it was 48 degrees or something, or 50 degrees. And
yeah, I think they said in the documentary it was like 50. It was 59 degrees. It was cold enough to kill you.
Okay.
So
yeah.
like,
So we swam. I remember. Oh, good.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, because there's so many things I didn't ask you, and that there's so many questions that just they pop into my head. The people that I was trying to refer was the Ananias family. They were in the documentary as well. I don't know if did they pick like the Discovery Channel? They kind of just did they pick you guys? They picked like the Ananias family, then they picked you guys, and then like they picked I think it was like a Hawaiian boy and or Hawaiian girl and an African guy. I can't remember their names, but they just pick each individual out and say these are the people that's going to be in the documentary. And did you have like a script, or was it all from your head?
Yeah, so no, I don't know how they reach out to us. I guess probably looking us up on Facebook or something, or maybe they called our local news station because our local news station had done stuff with us. But yeah, they just asked if they could. They had a film crew out of England doing a documentary, and they asked if they could come to our house. And so they flew from I don't know, I guess they were based out of New York or something, into Little Rock. It showed up at our house with all these cases and all the lighting and sound stuff you can think of. And it might have been 3 or 4 people, and they did sat us each down. And I told what's that?
Was that stressful at all? Like just like a bunch of guys with cameras and lights and chairs and.
Yeah, we had done so many interviews by then. It wasn't as much, and it was in our home, so it wasn't too bad. But it was, I mean, I just remember had to put the mic on the inside of your shirt and all that, and then get the lighting just right. And I think I told my whole story, spent like 30 minutes, and then my wife told her whole story, and then we both sat next to each other and told the story. So we had to do everything multiple times so they could pick what they wanted.
Right.
And then they had to do B-roll footage where they would say, clasp your hands, and so we would like be holding our hands, and then you'd make your hands like you're worried. They'd tell you to do all this B-roll footage, and then they would crop it out and use it later for while you're telling your story. They may cut off to your hands, but that wasn't like they only had one camera, so it wasn't like they had all these different cameras.
Right.
I think the Discovery Channel, they asked us what do we like to do, and we said we'd like to go hiking. So we actually went a couple houses down and hiked through the woods, and they did a bunch of B-roll footage of us hiking through the woods.
Right.
That was kind of weird. So.
Do you still?
But yeah, it was. I think they filmed us for. Oh, I think they filmed us for 3 or 4 hours, and they used us in the documentary for 30 seconds, maybe.
It was like a minute and a half.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy the amount of footage that they took.
Right.
So National Geographic came as well. They had flown a crew down too and did the same thing, but I think their flight was late or something, so they only filmed us for like an hour.
Right. And do you still have? Like you're like I know most people like. Obviously, there's no life jackets from like Titanic because they're all gone. But do you still have your gear from the night it sank? Like, do you have like a little place in your house where you have like a memorabilia or something? I don't really know, but that's just my guess.
Yeah. So we kept all our clothes. We had the clothes we were wearing, and that was it. We lost everything else. And then I still wear the jacket. It's like a light black jacket, like Columbia black jacket. I still wear it. We kept our life jackets. We actually walked into the airport with them. And some of airport officials that came up and said, you can't keep that. And we said, we're sorry, we're going to keep it. You can't take it from us. And we had to go back and forth. They got their supervisor, and they realized that there was a beacon on your chest that had a geo tag. And it was like, whenever you set the beacon and it hits water, it identifies to some world network something, and it would continue until the battery stopped. And so they said we couldn't fly with that. So they took this little thing off of our pocket that had I think it was a flashing strobe light, and it had a geotag on it. And they said we could keep the life jackets, just not that little device that transmitted our location, because they wouldn't allow that on a plane.
Right.
So, but yeah, we were the only people in the airport with a life jacket, and everybody seeing us were like, "Oh wow, they were on the ship. They have the life jackets."
Right. And so like the food, like your first day. Obviously, your first day was when like the disaster happened. And I know I wasn't able to ask you so many questions before because last time you spoke off camera, you had limited time. But like like, was it great to just like sit down and just enjoy like, you know, entertainment? Because for me personally, like, I know I've told you I've been, you know, going to school to be a merchant marine, but I've never been on a cruise ship myself. I've only been in the simulators. That's pretty much all I've been in. You know, I've never been on a cruise my entire life. I know people are gonna say
Yeah,
it's weird, but that's I've never had the I've had opportunities, but I just really don't want to, just because the way COVID is. I don't want to get stuck on a cruise ship. Like, I'd love to go sailing, you know, but I just don't want to get stuck. That's just
yeah,
my biggest fear. I'd rather wait till I'm licensed and everything is done and over with before I, you know, finish. That way I'm not stuck, you know.
yeah, yeah. So we ate dinner on the ship, and that was our only. We were only on the ship. I think we got on at 6:30. It struck the rocks at 9:30. We
Right,
jumped in the water at like somewhere around 11:30. So we were only on the ship maybe what 5 hours total. But
right,
we ate dinner in the big what do they call it, restaurant? I guess it was like the dining room. I guess it was what they would call it, on the third floor in the back.
right,
And yeah, it was an elegant dinner. I mean, they served you very well. It's a very formal dinner. Had a great experience. At the end of the dinner, all the employees came in from the kitchen staff and lined around the dining room, and they turned all the lights off. I think they were holding candles, and they sang a song. It's time to say goodbye. And I knew the song from I think Andre Bocelli sings it, and it's on the Bellagio fountains in Las Vegas. If you ever, they have like 10 songs they play over and over, and it's
right,
one of those songs, "Time to Say Goodbye." And they sang it, and when they sang it, all the Italian people in the crowds, which is most of them, stood up and sang it with them, because it was the last night of the cruise for most everybody on board. Of the what 3,000 people on, I think 2,500 or so were getting off the next day.
right.
And so yeah, they were just like saying, "Hey, we had a good week long cruise, and we're done." And so yeah, so they sang the song, and then they turned the lights back on, and we left and cleaned up. Yeah, it was a good one meal that we had on the ship. So
So,
we were the next day. So oh, good.
well, I was just gonna ask you, everything that you see on TV is not what you see in real life. Just for, you know, the viewers and people who are going to be watching this, Mark, like, what you're explaining right now is different from what, you know, I watch or another viewer watches on the TV. From, they're hearing your experience, but what your experience is totally different from how they filmed it. Correct?
Yeah, and you also have to understand, if the documentary creates drama, then more people will watch it. And so my wife and I and brother-in-law and sister-in-law are all pretty drama free.
Right.
We were lighthearted on the ship when it was sinking. We didn't know it was sinking. We
Right.
were joking around, having fun, you know, just kind of very lighthearted. There was nobody crying. There was no drama happening at all on the ship. The only time happened was when we jumped overboard and started swimming away from the ship fast. And I remember turning around halfway, and I cut my hands, and I said, "Swim faster, the ship's going to turn on us," you know. And
Yeah.
then I turned around and swam as fast as I could. And we got to shore, and the part of the ship that we were on was underwater within 10 minutes. So it's not like you had to swim for your life, but we sure thought you did at the moment. We thought it was just the ship was going to just turn over in 30 seconds, but it took a good 10-20 minutes to get to where it would have been dangerous.
Right.
So that was the only part where we were, you know, actually had any drama. So we actually, when we got on shore, I remember standing on the edge and helping people out of the water, and there were a lot of crew, a lot of uh, like, what do you call it, like entry level help, like the guys that do the dishes, the guys that clean the rooms. They didn't speak, you know, necessarily Italian or English. They were just people that were, you know, working on the ship. There were a
Right.
lot of them. Probably a third of the group that swam to shore were, you know, workers on the ship.
Right.
And there was one lady that I saw that had blood running down her face, and she was on shore. And I just went and got my wife, because my wife's a nurse, and I said, you know, and her friend was, this lady was just, you know, there's blood on her face, not a big deal, but her friend that was with her was just screaming out of control. And so somebody actually pulled her away from her. Is like, "Calm down, you know, your friend's going to be okay." It was just, you know, whenever you get a gash in your head, it bleeds a lot, and that's what happened. And you're wet, and so the blood looks worse because it kind of spreads through the
Right.
water. And I remember they took somebody's, you know, shirt or something like that, or coat, and just ripped it off and cleaned it up, put pressure on it. So it wasn't anything too crazy, but there were people that were barefoot walking around on the rocks, and there was like a brush about 2 feet tall, and there were a lot of people that were barefoot, because I guess they swam with, you know, if you had heels on for a woman at dinner and then you swim with them, they're going to come off. So a lot of people got to the shore without shoes on.
I mean,
Um, so we were kind of huddling in groups because it was windy and cold.
I mean, just for me personally, like I said, I've never been on a cruise ship. I've seen photos. I've been in the simulator up at the college, but being, I can imagine waking up at 9 p.m. at night, hearing an alarm going off saying in Italian, which is abbandonate, because that's what they said in the documentary, but saying abandoned ship, like, and you're in your cabin and you don't know which way to go because it's your first night on the cruise. And then all of a sudden I mean, you could get lost. I mean, I know like the National Geographic, they said that there was a woman in there that survived 3 days, but how she survived. But the reason she survived was because her cabin was like in the inner part of like the ship. It wasn't where the water was. So she had like an air pocket, which was somehow lucky. But when they pulled her out, they were like pulling her out like this. They dropped like a rope down from like where your door is, because your door is like this. So they dropped like a rope down. They were like pulling her up from her cabin, you know. And that's also what I saw in the documentary. They were people that were still on the deck. They were pulling them out like this, you know.
Yeah. So this all happened on Friday the 13th of January. So lucky Friday the 13th. And Saturday we were at a hotel in Fiumicino, and a bunch of Americans decided to meet up together and kind of have some discussions. And in that room when we were talking, there was I met the people that said they were in the hallway treading water until somebody dropped a rope ladder. They were on the documentary. There was also a Asian American couple, very young couple, probably in their young 20s, and they were from California. And they said that I don't know why, but they decided to go through the ship downward through the hallway. And when they got to the bottom, it was just a wall of water. And they were like, we can't climb back up, it was too steep. So they actually swam through the water out underneath the deck and came up. And that's their story. I mean, we were out there and I didn't see them, but I don't know when they would have done this. So I don't know. It must have been after we swam to shore because there wasn't anybody else. But yeah, they had to swim down to come out and up because the whole, the decks of each floor were like this.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know why they didn't get on the documentary, but that sounds pretty impressive, pretty heroic to swim like that.
And then like, I know that like other documentaries say that people got stuck in the lifts as well.
Yeah. So that was I think the night, maybe the next morning, we only knew of one death, and that was somebody that had a heart attack. And I think they showed like a body bag on the documentary, which, I mean, anytime you're going to have 4,000 people in a crisis, you're going to have somebody with a stroke or a heart attack or something. So we weren't concerned about that as much or worried about it. But then soon after, they had raised the death toll to like 12, and there were a lot of people missing. The 32 was what the official death toll was. But they didn't find a lot of people until quite a while after. And I think they attributed most of the deaths to the being in an elevator. People were stuck in an elevator.
Right.
Which, the electricity went out right away after they hit the rock. So they could have just been riding the elevator on a normal cruise, and the electricity went out and they got stuck.
Right. And then,
so there was also, we had heard about
you heard about, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, good. Oh yeah, we heard about a employee that was, like when they say muster stations, all the employees have jobs to do. Right. And there was a guy, his job was to go to the main dining room and stay there. And if people show up to say, no, don't be in here, go there. And so he just stayed where he was supposed to. And they never made a second call saying, okay, staff at your muster stations, now you can abandon ship. So he followed what he was supposed to and stayed there. And the dining room like filled up halfway with water, and he was just treading water when they found him in the dining room, and he had just never left his post. And I think he had a broken leg or something like that. I don't know what all happened. But yeah, that was kind of one of the heroes of the ship, was an employee that stayed in his spot to make sure people weren't in the wrong place during the whole incident.
Right.
So,
did you ever feel you get lost?
Yeah,
Concordia?
and they were. So I was only on the ship a short time, right. Enough to where like we ate dinner, and then my wife and sister-in-law went to bed, and then my brother-in-law and I decided to walk the ship and just see it. We went to the top floor. We went through the main atrium. You can see on the documentary with all the emerald green colors. And we walked around quite a bit and then went to bed. And yeah, I mean, it's a big ship. I was actually on a cruise. Was it 2 years ago? It was like in January of 2020, right before COVID hit. And the ship was identical to the Costa Concordia, except that the color theme was like blue instead of green. But everything was identical because my muster station was on the 4th floor and it was identical. I took pictures and showed them to my wife, and it was just scary how identical it was. And the whole place, it seemed like it. And yeah, I mean, those ships are big. You can get turned around on them for sure, because the hallways are 1,000 feet long. If the ship's 1,000 feet long, they're just crazy. The places are huge.
Right.
So yeah, you can be walking along and then the hallway ends because in front of you is a theater and you have to go up or down the floor to keep going or something. So yeah, it's a big place.
Well, it's probably Costa Pacifica. I know that's the sister ship of the Concordia, and I know I just looked online a couple days ago, and it said that she's out of service. I don't know why that Pacifica is out of
Oh.
service, but it was probably that one because that ship is spot on. It's like Concordia's back from the dead, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah, the one I was on was very much, I mean, it laid out the same way, all the dining room, everything that I had seen was in the same places and everything laid out the same way, the glass elevators, you know, and all that, which is common for cruise ships, but this one was, you know, very much identical. So yeah, it was quite the experience. So we actually, I think I told you earlier, a couple of years later, the four of us were together and we all said if we had to do it over again, we would still go through the same thing because it's just a memory you'll have for the rest of your life. And it wasn't necessarily negative. You know, we weren't watching people die. It
right.
was just like, I mean, it's like one of those weird bucket list things, you know, if you could be in a plane crash and everybody was totally fine, you know, then you'd say, hey, I was in a plane crash, you know, that kind of thing. Where for us, again, our entire time, we thought that there was an electrical problem and the ship tipped over. We had never known it hit rocks until the next day when somebody told us.
So I'm not
So the entire experience, you know, where we were trying to get a lifeboat, we had no idea.
I'm not ignoring you. I'm just trying to find. I don't know if you can see that. Does that look identical to Costa? Can you see that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, it does look good. Yeah, it's got the ships. Yeah, it's usually the lifeboats. So there's a third and fourth floor that are exterior. Yeah, you can see those lifeboats are on the third floor, and then above it are these like little windows, and that's where the fourth floor is. That's where our muster station was. So
Right.
yeah, and the lifeboats are hard sided and they have motors. They're called tenders. If you
Right.
ever go to a port without a dock, they'll lower those and transfer you back and forth.
Does this
Yeah.
one look about right? Because you said it was. Did you say it was blue or green?
Well, the whole ship's white, but inside in the lobby they had, and in the dining rooms they had green on the Costa Concordia,
Right.
like emerald green was like their theme color inside, and the one I was on was blue. It was
Right.
just like the same everything except for the color blue.
Right. So it's probably Pacifica.
Yeah,
So yeah, I
yeah.
mean, other than like what was your experience afterwards? Like I know we talked about it, but like I know you said like there was a hotel which I'm still fantasizing and obsessing about. Like you say that you went in there and then you woke up and then there was nobody in there. Like how does that happen?
Yeah, so
Go to a hotel and then there's
yeah,
nobody
so
in there.
yeah, when we were on shore, yeah, when we were on shore, again it was cold, and there was boats right, but they wouldn't come up to shore, and we were just standing there, 200 people on shore, cold and wet, just standing there, like what's going to happen? You know, we can't just stand out here. It's strong winds, it's cold out,
Right.
and there was a guy with a flashlight. And I walked up to him and said, "Where'd you get a flashlight? How do you have a flashlight?" We all just swam. He said, "I live in a house up there," and he pointed up the hill. And I said, "Oh, can we get out?" And he goes, "Yeah, there's a trail right over here." And so I was like, "Okay, we'll follow you." And so I kind of got everybody and just kind of said, "Hey, everybody, we're walking out." And so all 200 people lined up and followed this guy kind of through some brush up behind this house and came out. And he had been making calls on his cell phone and got friends of his from town to drive, you know, it's like a mile and a half away, to come up there to this house and pick us up. And they were picking us up by the carload to bring us down into town. And we got in a car. This little Italian man, you know, is probably 4'11" or something, just this tiny little guy, you know, probably 60 years old. We got in his car and he drove us around the corner and just stopped at this hotel. And there was this maybe 3-story hotel that was all cement. I mean, it's just like a European kind of suites. It's like some family owns this and has owned it for generations. And there was a line out the door. And so we got out there and got in line. And we are just kind of standing there shivering because we were wet. And somebody looked at us and said, "Why are you wet?" And we said, "Oh, because we had to swim to shore." And they said, "You need to go first." And they kind of parted the line. And there were probably 30 people in line or more. And the line stepped aside and they let us go by because we were wet. And we got to the front desk and checked in. They gave us a key. And I think we were on the third or fourth floor. So we walk up these stairs, cement stairs in this hotel, and come to this room. And the electricity was on, but there was no heat and no hot water and no hair dryer, nothing. And so we got to the room. And it was like you walk into this room and there's a bedroom, and then there's another room off of that further in. And there was a bed in each room. And so we just didn't know what to do. We were standing there in cold clothes. It's probably 58 degrees inside the hotel because it wasn't open that time of year. They just opened it for the cruise ship and for the survivors. And so we just, got in bed and tried to cuddle together to warm up, kind of first aid at that point, because you don't want to get hypothermia.
Right.
And we didn't want to take a shower because there were no towels. There was no hot water at all. And so we just went to sleep. And there was a tiny window in our hotel room, maybe a foot and a half wide by 2 feet tall. And it was like kind of, you think of in a castle where the walls are like a foot and a half thick. And then these little metal doors that go over the window. And ours was just closed. And so we went to sleep and then woke up the next day and you could see like a little slit of light through the shutters. And we thought, oh, I guess it's daytime. We should wake up. We had no idea what time it was because our iPhones had stopped working because we swam with them. This is before they were waterproof. And so we got up and we were kind of like wrapped in the blanket from the bed because we didn't want to, we were all wet, or our clothes are still wet. And so we were kind of debating on who's going to get their wet clothes back on and go figure out what's going on. And so I ended up being the one. So I got to put my wet clothes back on the next morning. And I walked out of our hotel room and there's just nobody there. There were life jackets strewed around, clothing, just nobody. And so I kind of like all the doors were open. You could walk through a couple of hotel rooms. There's just nobody there. So I walked down to the first floor and I just started yelling, is anybody here? Hello. And there's nobody at all. And it looked like a bunch of people had eaten like snacks, like, you could see like granola bar wrappers, that kind of stuff around. There was nobody there. Anywhere, I kind of looked around, walked through the kitchen, walked through the, where the front desk was, there's just nobody. So I went back up to our room and explained to everybody, our group of 4, said, hey, there's nobody here. I don't know where everybody went, but they're here, not here. And my brother-in-law said, oh yeah, a couple hours ago, somebody banged on our door. It said something in Italian and that was it. And we just thought, we don't know what he says. So they rolled over and went back to sleep. And my wife and I were on the next room in, so we didn't hear it at all because it was like a room inside of a room. And so apparently they went around the hotel and said, hey, the ferry's here. Get down to the port to get on the ferry, or something like that. Because the ferry, I think, left at like 3:30 in the morning or 4 in the morning with almost everybody on the ship back to Fiumicino. So we ended up walking down and we walked outside and there was like a gardener working outside. And we were just, again, wearing wet clothes. And we decided to walk around the corner, see if we could see the cruise ship. And we got around the corner. And it's kind of like the road went and did the big turn around this peninsula. And there was like a guardrail. I remember stepping over the guardrail and then the shore went down. And it's just like this rock outcropping that goes down towards the ship. And so we just started looking at it like, wow, this is crazy. The ship's like laying on the side right there. Again, we didn't know it hit rocks. So we're like thinking they had an electrical problem. The ballast went out and the ship laid on its side. Like, this doesn't make sense. And there was a guy there with an iPhone and a boom microphone attached to his iPhone. And he was a AP network news reporter. And he said, were you on the ship? And we said, yeah. And he said, can I do a story? And so if you search our names online, you can see us standing like on this rocky outcropping over the ship. And this guy's asking us questions. I think he was Dutch or something like that from, not exactly sure where he was from, but he spoke English pretty well, but he was some Dutch news agency and had just gone up there to get some footage of the ship. And so we did an interview with him. And then I think he gave us a ride down to the town. We got down there, the town of, I think it's the Port of Giglio is the town. And I remember there was a guy from the Costa with like a uniform on. And he had a checklist and he asked our names and he checked us off. And I think we went from, was it like 78 missing people down to 74 because we checked in, or maybe it was 72 missing people down to 68 or something. There were a lot of missing people at that point. So we checked in at that point. I'll say it again.
Oh, sorry. Were they still looking for people, Mark? Like after everything happened, after the tragedy, like they were still looking for people?
Yeah, and I'm not sure what I mean, they somehow got it down to within a day or two down to the 32 missing. So I don't know if they just miscounted in different areas, or maybe there are other people on the island like us that just got, misplaced and didn't know. When we showed up at town, it was like noon. We had no idea it was noon because we were still on Central Time Zone and had just shown up in Italy, which is 8 hours ahead. So our internal clocks were way off. So we had no idea it was, that late in the morning. Not like we intended to sleep in, but we were still on Central Time.
Right.
So yeah, but we were, I remember sitting in a cafe,
right,
and we wanted to get some coffee, but we had no money, no way to pay. And so I think a reporter bought us each coffee. And then we were sitting there, and my brother-in-law wandered off to go check out the town. And he came back with like 3 hot pizzas and a couple jackets that were dry. And so, yeah, because we're still, again, sitting there in our wet clothes, in town. And I remember at one point there was like a rescue worker. I don't know if it was Coast Guard or what, but he had like this fireman jacket and he put it over me because they wanted to do an interview, and it looked better for me to wear this like fireman's jacket. So they put it over me. And I talked on the camera for like 10 minutes, and I thought, this is the first time I got warm, because it was like a fireman's jacket and it was really well insulated. And I thought, wow, I actually warmed up. And as soon as the interview was over, he took the jacket back, and I was like, oh, I'm still wet and cold, because we couldn't go inside anywhere. There was like nowhere to go inside. We were just waiting around for a couple hours until the next ferry left to go back to the main shore.
And how long did it take you to get from the wreck site, the main island, back to Arkansas, where you're sitting right now?
Yeah, so we took the ferry back, and then the cruise company had kind of rented hotel rooms in two big hotels next to each other. And so all the people were there, and they tried to get us to fly home on Sunday because they didn't want to pay for our accommodations anymore. They just wanted to get us out of their hair. And we talked amongst ourselves, and we had all taken off 9 days of vacation. And I thought, I don't want to go back home and go back to work. I'm in Italy. I want to go on vacation. So we all talked about it and decided to stay. And so we ended up kind of working out a system. Like there's a guy that wanted us on Good Morning America on Sunday morning. So we bartered with him. We said, we'll get on Good Morning America if you buy us a pair of clothes, each of one of us a pair of clothes. So we got that. And then he paid for our hotel for one night to stay at this small hotel in Rome. And then I think he paid for our taxi to get from Fiumicino to Rome as well. He may have bought us a meal. We did have cash on us. We had credit cards, so we were fine. But we ended up, we didn't have any way to communicate with people. So when we were at the hotel in Fiumicino, we were making every phone call we could, just to tell people, because we had unlimited international calling, because Costa paid for it. And we knew after that day, we'd have no way to communicate with people back home because all of our phones weren't working. And this is back in the day of internet cafes. So we ended up doing that later in the week. We all sat down at an internet cafe and emailing people, because that was the only way you could communicate.
Right.
But we ended up, going to this hotel and just sightseeing in Rome. And we did some tours of the Vatican, did some really neat tours. We ate a lot of Italian food, found some bakeries to get the pastries in the morning and coffee. And yeah, just had a good vacation for a week. And then we flew out, I think the next Friday we flew home to go back to Little Rock. And funny thing is, the news stations in Little Rock, Arkansas, had followed us because we were the only 4 people from Arkansas on the cruise ship. And I guess it was national news. And so we had, somehow we were communicating with people, but they got our flight numbers, and our airport's tiny. It's 13 gates. So it's a one terminal that's like one hallway with like 6 gates on each side. And when you come out of the terminal, you end, and then there's this escalator that comes down, and all the people wait at the bottom of the escalator, like your friends and family, if they're going to meet you at your flight. And so we were walking out, carrying our life jackets, and we had like, I think I had like a trash bag or something with our other set of clothes in it, because we only had 2 sets of clothes for the whole week. And because we lost all of our belongings. And I remember coming down the escalator, and there was all 4 major news stations lined up, like all, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, like the local stations. And they each had like the person with the microphone and these big lights. And they came, we came down, and our family came forward and it gave us all big hugs. And, my mother-in-law was very dramatic, and sister-in-law very dramatic, like, oh, we thought you were going to die. We're so happy you're home. And we're like, okay, and then we kind of lined up and did interviews with those 4 news stations. And then, so we were at the airport probably an hour.
They didn't like get in your face and be like, Mark, like, what was the experience like? They didn't do that like most news people do.
No, it wasn't that crazy, but all 4 stations were there, and they all had cameras on tripods, and they, each did an interview with us. And then I want to say 2 days later, we went to a news studio, and maybe 2 different stations. We sat in their studio and did a news story. And we'd actually found out that we went to church on that Sunday, 2 days later, and all of our church, was aware. I guess we were the news topic. And the Sunday before, a news station had showed up. What's that?
Internet celebrities right here.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Sunday before, one of the news stations showed up at our church and had filmed part of the service and had interviewed our friends. Like, what's it like knowing that your friends were on the Costa Concordia? A news station showed up to our church and was like interviewing people. And a news station had gone up to my in-laws' house about an hour away and sat in their living room and be like, is your family okay? Tell us what happened. And so they had interviewed all of our friends and family. So, well, I was going to tell you from the hotel in Fumicino,
Yeah.
I was some radio station called my room from Chicago, some huge radio station, talk radio station. They did an interview with me over the phone, and I was like live on the radio. I don't know what it was. And then we got a call from what's her name, Greta Van Sesteren or something like that, from Fox News,
Right.
and she wanted us on to be on her show on the phone that night. And we were trying to figure out what time it was going to be at, and it turned out it was going to be at 3 a.m. And we're like, well, it's already like 11 and we're kind of tired. We're not going to stay up till 3 a.m. to be on Fox News. Sorry. But then the next day, I think it was CBS. I don't know what they call their morning show. Some lady found us and she was like, will you be on our show and all that? And we're like, sure. So we committed to be on her show the next morning, on Sunday morning. And then the ABC Good Morning America found us. And we're like, I don't know who CBS's morning show is, but everybody knows Good Morning America. I'd rather be on Good Morning America. And the guy promised us a pair of clothes and dinner and a taxi ride and one night in a hotel. So we're like bartering. And so we ended up telling the other CBS lady, sorry, they're offering us more than you are. So we're going to go with Good Morning America. So,
Right.
but it was in like some small studio in Rome. They had like a pull down backdrop. They pulled down and it was like the Coliseum behind you, it was like a green screen or something. And yeah, we were on the Good Morning America on Sunday morning, which I don't know if people watch a Sunday morning. We were pretty proud of ourselves.
So I don't know if you've seen, like I said, I don't have the actual podcast equipment. I just have a computer and Zoom link and a phone. But there was,
Yeah.
if you give me a second, I can just look it up here and try to find the date. Because this next topic I'm going to try to. So there's a guy named, his name is Joris Jansen. He did an interview 8 years ago of 7/27, 2013. He did the interview with Scatino, and that was a Zoom.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you saw that or not, but
Yeah.
you did see that one where they.
I did. You sent me the link, yeah, and I saw it. I'd never seen it before. Yeah,
Right.
but I watched it with that link you sent me.
Yeah, and there was another one that he did apparently, but my theory is I can't understand, Mark, why would you, if you're dedicated to something, like I know I've only known you for like a couple days, a couple weeks, I'm not really too sure how long it's been, but when you're dedicated about something, why couldn't you just like be honest, like say, hey, this is what is actually happening, at least have some sort of respect and love. Like if that was me and my ship was going to sink, I would go down to the dining hall on stage, tell everyone, come down to this area, I need to tell everyone what's going on, be like, hey, the ship is sinking, this is how much time we have left, this is where I need everybody to be, I'm going to help you get off, I'm going to make sure you get home to your family, I'm going to pay for your flights, because the captain's rich, he's got, mind my language on YouTube, but he's got a fuck ton of money, so he could have paid for at least half of, he could have said, hey, I'm going to pay for half of the people on board, to get you home wherever you live, at least that's what I would have done personally. If I was a millionaire and I had tons of money,
Yeah.
That's just me. I would have said, hey, I'm going to make sure you guys get home safely because that's my job and that's my duty.
Yeah. Well, I think I told you that we were on shore after we'd swam and we were on the rocks, and some employees we were talking to on the ship said, oh, the captain got off the ship like an hour ago. We're like, what do you mean the captain? The captains don't get off the ship. They're like, oh yeah, he got off on a lifeboat. He's in the port. We're like, how do you know? Like somehow all the crew and staff on the ship knew that the captain had abandoned ship himself and had gotten off. Right. And his story was that he slipped and fell into a lifeboat. And that's kind of what he first said. And then during that interview, he was talking about how the Coast Guard demanded he get back on the ship. And he's like, I can't. They were saying, climb the rope ladder. And he's like, but there's no rope ladder on that side of the ship. It's like, quit arguing, like
yeah.
If there's people getting off the ship, then you can get on the ship, then go to the other side of the ship. Don't make some technicality as to why you can't get on. But yeah, there's no reason he couldn't have been on the ship until the last person was off the ship, and he could have survived and been fine.
Yeah,
Just like the last people that were climbing down rope ladders into lifeboats.
he probably still could have had his job or
Yeah,
something, but that's what I saw. I know you talked a lot
yeah,
about National Geographic, and I watched one, but it was like an hour, 2 hour long, and I fell asleep midterm, but I woke up and I heard them talking about him, and they said that he only cared about himself and he didn't care about anybody on that ship except him. It was all about him. And they said that he suffered from some sort of mental illness, but like I said, I was like half asleep. I could barely, I was barely awake, but I only heard like bits and pieces of it. So, but definitely it just goes to
yeah.
show, you don't care about anybody, you just an attention freak.
So another thing that kind of surprised me is, I told you that all the Americans got together in a hotel ballroom to kind of chat on Saturday.
Right.
Like, what are we going to do? How do we get home? Let's share information with each other. And so people were saying, there's an embassy in Rome. You can go there and get a temporary passport. We're like, oh, this is great, because the cruise ship collects your passports when you get on the ship. So we didn't have our passports. We didn't have, luckily, we all had our wallets. I think 3 out of the 4 of us, we all had driver's licenses and things like that. Somehow some Canadians had showed up to the meeting too, which, I mean, they're part of North America. We didn't care. But the Canadians, their ambassador had come and picked them up and taken them shopping to get clothes, taken them out to dinner, and like treated them really well. And we're like, oh, like maybe this will happen to us, And so we went to the embassy. I want to say it was Saturday afternoon, and we showed up, and it was like you'd guess in any country, it's like some big, stone building with like a wall around it with a razor wire on top, kind of thing. And there was a guard shack at the front, and there was this long like line that you could go through, like at the airport, with those little stretchy tape things where you have to kind of herd through. And so we were in line there, maybe 15 of us in line, and we got dropped off by a taxi, and they were just searching people like crazy, going through this, just doing the whole like metal detector. Oh, it beeped again, oh, two zipper, just doing the whole thing. And this guy walked out, an American in a suit, and he said, these guys were on the ship, just let them through. And the security guards are like, okay. But I guess all the security there are Italian. I didn't realize that when you have an embassy in another country, that country provides security for your embassy. I thought it'd be like American Marines, like you'd expect in the movie about Iraq or Afghanistan or something.
Right.
And so they, the guys actually pulled aside and just let us all walk straight through without doing the metal detector and all that. And we came inside, and there was a place to get passports. And so they like hand you the paperwork, and all the employees in the entire embassy were Italians, which were like, where's the Americans? We're at the American embassy. Like, this is weird. Again, I didn't know that embassies are staffed by the people, so they'd hired Italians. And so we filled out the paperwork, and we went like down 2 floors, and they had like this little photo booth, like you see at like a carnival, where you sit down and you put money in, and you make your poses, and then it prints out the little things of pictures. And that's how we got our postcards or our pictures for our passports. And so we got those, brought them back up, and then just sat and waited, and they gave us temporary passports all within like an hour. And that was it. And the entire time we were there, we saw the American guy for like 3 minutes. He walked out, let us all go through security, and then disappeared. And then we went through all this stuff, never again saw an American. It was all Italians. And nobody offered us clothes, nothing. And the little photo booth thing cost €5. And again, luckily we had some money. But the people that got off the ship with no money, they wouldn't let them pay for it for free. Like, they're just like, sorry, you have to pay the $5 for the photo for your passport. And so the embassy offered to loan people money, and they could call your family and friends. And if you could have someone in America vouch for you, they would loan you like $100 or a couple $100, and you had to pay it back to the embassy. It was like some sort of loan. And it was like, seriously, it's a photo for a passport because you were just on a ship that sank. Like,
Right.
can't you just hand them $5 or, turn the machine on to free or something?
Like, how much torture do you have to go through before you can just get home,
Yeah, and I think we had heard that the Canadians had gone to the Canadian ambassador's residence and like had dinner with him or something there, or just something crazy. It was like he just took care of them. Like, hey, I'm sorry, you're on a cruise ship. I'm here. Let me take care of you.
Right.
Ours is just like, pay the $5. So yeah, we were very disappointed by all that.
And in the documentary, I mean,
Didn't feel like anybody was looking out for us or taking care of us.
In the documentary, you explained everything so perfectly, and you explained how like you turned your hand like this, and you explained how you were right here and the ship was like this. I mean, you nailed everything like so far. So I guess like the other question that I have is, when you got home, you know, and you got through Canada and all that, would you go sailing again? If I know we talked about that, would you continue? I know you, like I said, I'll let you kind of lead the way, but would you ever decide to go
Yeah.
sailing again if opportunity came up?
Yeah, so I'm kind of a statistics guy where I look at it and say, what's the likelihood of me being on a ship a second time in life that sinks? you know, Zero. So like I went on a cruise for work maybe 3 years ago, and then another one 2 years ago. And all my coworkers are like, "We're going to go on a cruise ship with you because it can't sink. It's statistically impossible to be on two cruise ships that are going to sink." So just kind of joking about it, but yeah, I feel fine about cruising. I feel fine about everything. Um, I feel like the staff did a good job on the ship, even if we didn't have a drill because the drill was scheduled for the next morning. So
Right.
even though we had never had a drill and known where to go, the staff were all in the hallway directing us where to go. They were watching out for us. So I feel like there was nothing to be worried about. My wife experienced seasickness in the first hour on the boat and was like, I don't think this is going to go well just because of motion sickness. So
Right.
she doesn't want to go on a cruise again because of that. She doesn't like small planes or boats, for seasickness.
So, am I the only person that's reached out, or I was actually thinking about this like a couple years ago. I was actually thinking about you and your family, and I was like, man, how do I get a hold of Mark or Sarah? Or I was like, as time went on, I was like, everybody's got social media, so I just was, a couple weeks
Yeah,
ago, I
yeah,
spoke to my mother. My mother's sitting in the chair over here, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna reach out to one of the Concordia survivors. How do I go about that? She's like, I don't know, like look them up on Facebook. I'm sure everyone has social media, so I did. I mean, has anybody else like reached
yeah.
out and asked for you to tell your story, or am I just
So there was maybe 3 years ago, there was a lady from Canada that was on the ship with us, and she had I don't know how I got talking to her. I think she messaged us on Facebook or something. And I called and talked to her for like an hour and kind of told her our story. And she told us her story. And her story was very conflicting with our story, which confused me because I'm just like, it's been 7 years at that point since we were on the ship. But why am I remembering it so differently than she did? And I didn't want to argue with her, but I was like, so tell me again where you were on the ship and how did you get off? And she explained it all. And I was like, because we were right by you and we were the ones that did that. And just it was very conflicting. And she wrote a book and had published a book on it and all that. And I was like, I told my wife later, I was like, I feel bad because I think she's got a lot of stuff wrong. And she published a book on it. And I called my brother-in-law and I was like, do you remember being here at this time and doing this? And he's like, yeah. And he agreed with me on everything. And I was like, this lady is saying a totally different account of stuff, and she wrote a book and I was like, I don't want to prove her wrong, but, you know, I feel like she's wrong. So that was one experience later on. Um, we have I mean everybody at my work, everybody at my wife's work wanted to hear the story, so for probably 2 years after the cruise, everybody you'd run into and be like, oh Mark, you were on that ship, weren't you? Tell us the story. So we both told the story way too many times. And so yeah, so you have a lot of that going on, and we still run into people. There was a good friends of ours that about a month ago we were talking about something and they're like, oh yeah, and Sarah was like, my wife is like, I'll never go on a cruise again. They're like, why? And we both put our heads down like, you never heard? And they're like, no. So then we have to tell the whole story again. So it's just like, we haven't had a whole lot of people reaching out to us, I guess. We reached out to a local news station through a friend a couple weeks ago and said, hey, the 10-year anniversary is coming up. If you guys want to fly us to Italy, you can come with us and do a news story because we'd be happy for someone to pay for us to go to Italy.
right,
But they didn't bite on it. So
right.
yeah. But there was a memorial up there, and a bunch of people showed up on Giglio for the 10-year memorial. Would have been neat to go to, but we've got lots of kids, and it'd be hard to get away for a trip like that.
Right. Do you ever feel people
So, yeah,
kind of like that woman? Like I said, I'm not. If this woman, come across my YouTube channel, I'm not trying to be disrespectful or anything, but you feel people just make up, say, yeah, I was on the Concordia. This is my encounter. But when you ask them, well, you got any solid proof? Like, do you feel some people lie about it just to get attention about it?
yeah. I don't know.
That's my question.
I haven't run into it. She had, she told me enough stuff to where I believe she was on the ship.
Right.
But the place she described, she said she jumped and swam to shore, and she was the first person. And she said she jumped from the bow area, And she said when they got to shore, nobody else was there. We jumped from the stern, the back of the ship, on the fourth floor. And, we were the first ones to jump in and swim to shore. And, 200 people swam with us. And when we got there, there were 200 people there because we all swam to shore.
Right.
And somehow she claims that she was, like 600 feet down the ship towards the front and had jumped off and swam to shore and was the first person to shore. And the people with her swam. And we were with those 200 people, and there were no English speaking Americans at all. We talked to every single person, as we were waiting to get on the boat we thought was coming back, and when we got out of the water, and making sure people were okay. There was no Americans there. There's no way she was part of that group. So I don't know how she was telling a lot of our story, but we don't remember her. And she was telling it with some differences. She ended up getting in, somehow getting to town that night and staying in a school overnight. They had like a middle school or something like that they had turned the heat on and opened up for a bunch of survivors to like sleep on the floor.
Right.
So, but yeah, her story was very different than ours.
So, how, if people want to like reach out to you, I guess like, because my wrap up question, if people want to reach out to you, how can they go about it? Do you have like a business email or like a social media? I know your wife has one, but if someone wants to reach out to you and ask questions, what's the best possible way for them to do that?
Yeah, probably. My personal email is just my name, markplath@gmail.com.
Right.
So that'd probably be the easiest way. And then, instead of typing it all out, I'd, kind of exchange a couple emails, and then I'd be happy to talk to someone on the phone if they have questions.
Right.
So one other thing that came up too with that is, maybe 2 months after the incident, we had a congressman reach out to us and ask us to fly to Washington, D.C. and testify before a hearing on how to make cruise ships safer. And we're like, well, this sounds interesting. And it's funny, but we're like, so how do we do this? They're like, well, because of the way it's set up, you have to pay for everything yourself. We're like, so we have to pay for our own flights and hotel and everything. They're like, yeah, the government doesn't pay for witnesses to come and speak before Congress. And it was going to be in like a side room with like some commission or something like that. It wasn't like the full Congress. And so we were considering it, and we had a lawyer friend, and he had recommended against doing future interviews at that time because he said anything we say Costa could use against you. Everything we say that's documented, they could use against you if you try to get a settlement with them down the line. They could say, they could use against you. So we ended up telling them no at the time. But that would have been interesting to go up to DC and do, speak before some sort of commission on what changes to make for cruise ships. But we talked to the guy on the phone quite a bit, but we didn't go up there for that.
And what do you think those changes are? You want to make changes on a cruise ship? What do you think they would be, Mark?
The only change that I ever heard was that if new passengers arrive on a ship, they have to do a drill before that ship leaves port. And so again, I've been on 2 cruises since then. And like you get on, let's say at Friday night, boarding time's like 6, and then they push away at 7:30, start sailing. Before they can push away from the dock, they have to do a muster station drill where everybody shows up to the muster station, goes through it. And the ones I've been on, the staff had iPads, and you had to check in. They had to scan your badge, or they had to check every single person in. And if you didn't show up to the drill, then they would find you and then make you repeat it or something. So they're real specific about that. Because the cruise we were on, pushed off on a Friday night, and then they were scheduling the drill on Saturday morning, which would, not be long after we took off, but it sank a couple hours later. So there were a lot of people on the ship that hadn't gone through the drill yet.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
so I think that's the only change that I'm aware of.
Right. I'm not aware of any other changes either. As being a captain in training and going through the schooling to do it, I don't have anything that I would say, but I do know that the muster station drill is a mandatory thing that all cruise ships, like you said, before leaving port, has to get done, whether it's a training vessel like the state of Maine or even a small yacht craft that, like a pleasure. If it has a captain and it's not, a personal boat. I mean, there are billionaires that do have cruise ships, don't get me wrong, but if it's a business wise ship, it has to have that muster station drill. Yeah,
I think the whole experience would have been different if the captain, he knew he was taking on water.
Yeah.
They knew the electricity was out because the water hit the generators immediately. Within 2 minutes, they probably knew all that. If they would have sounded the alarm, announced abandoned ship, let people get on lifeboats and lower down. We could have used every lifeboat. There were quite a few unused ones because they couldn't get off
Right.
because it was just too much of an angle by the time they got to them. So I think that would have changed everything. Even if we were out to sea, I mean, every one of those lifeboats had a motor and a propeller, and they could drive them. You know, even if you're not, you're just out there floating until somebody comes and pulls you. But either way, if he would have sounded it, I don't know how far before, 45 minutes before he actually did, there would have been a lot more time to get off the boat.
Well,
So I'm sure that's probably in captain
Well-
training for cruise ships.
what Scatino said is he was waiting for the shore to drift back to land because he somehow said it was safer for him because he said that it would save more people on the ship itself.
And I think that's easy to say afterwards, but when we hit the island, we were drifting out to sea, and we turned around and drifted back because of the wind. So was he really calculating during all this? There's a 35-mile-an-hour wind. It's going to push us back into that island. I don't think he knew all that. I think that was just luck. I don't think he could have sat there and said, "Let's just wait it out until we drift back to the island." You know.
Let me see if I can. I'm trying to find where he said we can just watch the clip. We'll just watch this clip really quick. It's 5 minutes if you don't mind. It's a 5-minute clip of
Yeah.
explains this.
The other aspect of that scrutiny was the phone call with the Coast Guard.
That phone call doesn't represent nothing.
To listen to it, and this was the
There was
popular perception. Here you had the Coast Guard captain standing up for the passengers, trying to get the captain of the ship to go back and help them. And you were resisting. That's the way it was explained.
There were several other conversations, telephone calls between me and the Coast Guard. That guy, I thought was a guy that was talking to him 20 minutes, half an hour before, but it was another one.
Yeah.
And more than a Coast Guard captain, he's a lawyer, because he's one that is familiar with law. In Italy, you can become Coast Guard captain also by studying law without having practical experience of sea.
Yeah.
And obviously, this guy, he was saying things without any sense to me. And furthermore, it was at 1:42 in the night. The ship was completely capsized already 1 hour and a half before. So that would not make any kind of difference.
So let me just interrupt. At 1:42 a.m., he's telling you to get back on the ship, to use the rope ladder, he says.
Yeah, but
Was it possible to do that?
he was indicating the one that was submerged, because he was indicating the one on the right side. And that's why I was asking, sorry, it's dark, I cannot see. To which ladder you mean? He would have said to me, Captain, I am referring to the one that my rescue man is indicating that is on the left side. The problem is that guy, he was not understanding that the ship, instead of being bow to south, he thought was bow to north. He was indicating a ladder that for sure I was not able to see because it was on the opposite side. And in the meantime of this conversation, I saw a rescue boat that I thought was from the Coast Guard. And it was not from the Coast Guard, because you cannot detect that, because the personnel, the two guys, they were not in the uniform. They had the rescue overalls. And I said, okay, regardless what he's saying or not, let me concentrate. Maybe he wants to tell me something that is a word that I try to understand. It was not a simply elegant formulation of nothing. You count the people, is there men, the women, is something that is just, oceanography. I don't understand. So maybe he's in panic, maybe he wants to tell me something that let me understand what I can do more. And I was trying to calm down. I never believed that a shipwrecked man is trying to calm down his rescuer. Anyway, this is the first time in history. But I took the lifeboat, and I boarded the lifeboat and I told the guy, the crew of this rescue boat, let's go on the other side and try to understand how I can reach this ladder, to do what. All of a sudden, we were also start to embark water on this boat. And I realized that that boat was not belonging to the harbor master, but was a rescue boat that was from a ferry boat that was assisting us. And the captain on the ferry told the guys on the rescue boat, so Captain, we are sorry, our captain is telling us, go back to the port and you will come here back in any other miss, because otherwise we will sink also with this rescue. Because it was not for four of us, because they were told them, me plus the staff captain that was with me on the rock, and we decided, they, upon their order, they command, we went ashore. After that I went ashore, I was contacted by the deputy safety of our company. And he was telling me that he needs somebody to go on board to try to assess the problem. And that's okay. Since now I am here, we have the fireman, we have the proper equipment, we have a boat that where we can reach this ladder, because it was not the ladder on the start, it was the one on the left. So I should have swim for 300 meters and then climb the ladder. And I told the guy, yes, I'm ready to go. And he told me, Captain, tomorrow we have an interrogation. You have to make a statement. It's better don't go. Please delegate one of your officers. And upon their precious order, I was not boarding again the Costa Concordia.
So you as a survivor, your thoughts on that? You think he's just talking BS?
Yeah, I think he's dance around the subject not to admit any blame, and I think he, is splitting hairs saying, he told me to get on the wrong side of the boat. You couldn't because it was submerged. It's like, well, then tell the guy, I'll go up the other side. Like, you're in charge here. Are you not? Like, are you not in charge of the rescue operation while it's happening? You're
Right.
still the captain of the boat, figure out a way to get back on your boat.
Right.
I think he's just giving excuses for his, I think he got off on a lifeboat because he was, he had a mistress on the boat and he was probably married and he didn't want everybody to know. And so somehow, he got in the boat probably with her to kind of escape and kind of keep it quiet. And,
Right.
that was probably what his intent was to do. Or he was just afraid of the situation, wanted to get out of there. But
Right.
yeah, I don't think he has any reason why he couldn't have stayed on the boat or gotten back on the boat.
Right. I mean, we'll never really know because, he's not on, he's serving his lengthy prison sentence. So, but yeah, anyways,
At home, probably in his mansion. I think he's got a house arrest for 16 years.
yeah. So it's been an hour and I know what time do you have? I have 9 p.m. here for me, 9:06.
Yeah, so 8 o'clock, yeah.
Yeah, so I would really, like I said, I would wrap this up, but I really got to go use the restroom. So, but to end this podcast, Mark, it's been a great honor. And like I said, I have high respect for you and your family. And like I said, I'm going to link your email down below in the description. So if anybody wants to reach out to you, I'll make sure they have contact information for you. But
Yeah, great.
to end it, anything else that we should know about or I should know about?
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right. Well, hey, take care and stay safe and God bless you and just happy health and just stay upright. All right.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank
And
you.
God bless. Have a good one.
Bye.